Okay, we got the mechanics of setting up a small ZWO ASI224MC one-shot color camera. And it's a OSC one-shot color to the NexStar 6se SCT 6se for the deep sky observing DSO. And good evening, everyone. My name is Dave Allen, and I'm a member of the Astronautical Society at Greater Hartford and Night Sky Network, among others. I'm going to share with you a couple of ways on how to set up your 6se and the OSC camera with the proper back focus. Your optical train is in the back of your 6se for your DSO, deep sky objects. So also 3 ways to correctly collimate your 6se. And you may ask questions as we go. And do we have any questions so far? Okay.
None in the chat either.
All right. You'll need a Celestron f6.3x or Meade f.6.3x discontinued focal reducer flattener. And you can pick one up online for about $155, new from Celestron, or less used at Cloudy Nights classified for either one when available. Focal reducers are primarily used for astronomy to compress the light cone exiting the telescope down to a size closer to that of the sensor, which is on your camera. This also results in a brighter image, which increases less exposure time. The reducer gives us a small display of a large nebula, etc., or you won't be able to fill in the finished TIFF picture after stocking and processing with the OSC camera. A focal reducer for planets is not really needed, where you want as large a shot as you can get with them, but you could use one for the moon to take a smaller subject. Okay, now you can also use a GSO 0.5x focal reducer without the diagonal and the 6.3x reducer. And they cost about $50. And that places the camera at a working distance of 53.5 millimeters from the camera's sensor. So I don't know if you can see this with my, if you notice on the picture there, I have the focal reducer, 0.5x. Then I have the IR cut filter, the ultraviolet IR cut filter, which we need for this camera. And that's 6 millimeters. So we get the focal reducer, which is 6 millimeters from the lens to the cut filter. And then we have the cut filter. And then we have 29 millimeters for the adapter that goes with the camera. Then from the top of the camera to the sensor of the camera, if you notice, you go from left to right here on that diagram on top, you get 12.5 millimeters. If you add them all up on the bottom, it comes to 53.5 millimeters. And that's the correct focal resistance, or focal point of the camera in a telescope. And you just put that right in the back of where the visual back is, in the back of your telescope. When you first get your telescope, you have a visual back you take off. We'll leave it on. Okay. You'll need a Botter UV IR cut filter equivalent for about $60 to $80. And you need the UV IR cut filter on the ASI ASI224MC camera for DSO. So this camera is sensitive to infrared, not like some other cameras that aren't. It needs this filter for DSO. Adding an IR cut filter will negate the IR sensitivity of the camera. You will want that for the best image quality when imaging the invisible light. Without the IR blocking filter, your color balance will be off and your stars will be bloated and appear soft and unfocused. Now when you're using, we'll get away from the DSO 0.05 or 0.50 X, and we'll go back to the 6.3 focal reducer corrector. Now you need a stock 1.25" diagonal or better one that came with the 6se for proper back focus. The diagonal perfectly puts the proper distance from the 6.3x reducer corrector to the sensor of the OSC camera, so that the focal point in focus is right on the sensor. The distance from the end of the focal reducer corrector to the camera's sensor should be exactly 105 millimeters. And I'll show you how to measure it. The star diagonal in 6se is required, so you make up 105 millimeters for spaces in a camera, or otherwise hit the base of the NexStar when slowing upwards with the scope without it. And you'll find that when you use your GSO 1.25" focal reducer on your camera. So you got to be careful. Normal astrophotography rigs don't need the use of a diagonal. It's preferable not to for reasons outside the scope of this talk. And you need a 60-cent ruler with centimeters and millimeters on one side and inches on the other. That's handy when you get a different type of camera and are measuring different back focuses in millimeters, the manufacturer's specs. The website for a particular camera should give you a needed diagram for attaching different types of cameras, spacers, etc., and just how much they cost. You also need a 10 and a 15 millimeter eyepiece tonight. If you also have a 2x Barlow, that'll be used also for really fine tuning your scope for collimation, but not necessary. You need a Hubble Optics artificial star, but you can do without that and do with a sky outside bright track star test. An artificial star around $24.95. And you can look it up on Google here. That's the number for it. It's a small flashlight having an aluminum lens cover, 5 different size holes. I use it on my 6se for I want my scope already perfectly collimated before I go out and surfing. At the same time, but still do a sky star test, make sure I'm dead on out in the field. Okay, hold on a second here. On your laptop, for your ASI224MC camera, or any video camera, one shot, you'll need a 0.5 i5 better processor on your laptop. You also need at least a 1 terabyte hard drive, or at least a 500 gigabit solid state drive. Your OSC uses a lot of megabits. Or if you don't have a 1 terabit or a 500 gigabit SSD on your computer, you can purchase a portable one and attach it to your computer and send the information to it. And you also need at least 8 gigabits of workable RAM. You need a large cardboard box. These are things you need outside. When you turn sideways and put a piece of plastic stapled to the top, you can put your laptop inside to keep the dew off the computer when you're observing. Pretty handy. I use it a lot. You'll need a dew heater system for your SCT's collector, your finder, and possibly your camera if it's colder than 23 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the lowest you can go before a heater for a workable lamp temperature. You need a small table to put your equipment, box, computer, etc. on, comfortable chair for your table, and a large battery to handle your SCT tracking, dew heater computer, like a Jackery, which I use. It has a 12-volt socket for my collector dew heater, 2 USB outlets for my dew heaters for the finder and the camera, and 110 volts for my computer that I'm out in the field. You can plug electricity in it while connected and it won't damage the unit. If you have electricity where you are, you need a 3-prong plug extension cord with a 3-socket tail to power your equipment. Now we'll get to setting up your scope with the back focus on it. So unscrew the visual back piece off the back of the telescope. Clean the focal reducer flattener on both sides with a bold brush lens tool or a lens brush. And brushing lint or sand and dust off the filters and lenses should always be done so that the dust falls away, not just brush to the side where it can fall back on the filter and lens again. The focal reducer should be clean with no dust, no smudges, no fingerprints. Now we'll screw the focal reducer onto the telescope. Let me do that. That keeps the dust from entering the back of the telescope. Take the visual back off that you first took off the back, right, which I just did. It's here on the table. Mount the diagonal all the way and tighten it. So let's cut out the diagonal. Okay. Now take your ASI224MC camera, and you'll find it came with a 1.25" black 29mm adapter. Take that adapter off the front of the camera.
So that's your adapter and your UV-IR cutoff.
Yeah. And where the adapter screw in the camera screws into the camera right here, screws into the camera like so. You put your UV-IR cut filter in like so.
Those are typical 1.25" threads on any eyepiece. Right. And the back end is the M42 that goes to any T adapter.
And you screw it back on to the camera, the 29mm adapter onto the camera, the UV cut filter inside. And you want that finger tight, and you slide the camera with the 1.25" adapter on the other side of the diagonal all the way and tighten the diagonal. Now, you just made 105mm back focus trait. Well, let's measure. Okay, now we're going to measure the back focus. So what we're going to do, take your millimeters of your rule.
We can't see what you're doing.
You see that?
There we go. Thank you.
And go from here to the hole right here in your diagonal. That's where the mirrors are. So if we measure From the edge here where it hits the focal reducer to that hole, I have 46.5 or 46. It's 46 millimeters. You gotta go a little before the hole because of the thickness of the mirror. So we got 46 there. Let's write that down. 46 millimeters. Then we're going to measure from this hole here on the other side, in the middle of the diagonal, to the front of the camera. Let's measure that. And I have 46.5. 46.5. Let's write that down. 46.5. Now, the distance from the adapter screws in right here to the front of the ASI camera sensor has a back focus of 12.5 millimeters, according to the guide that came with the camera. So let's write down 12.5 millimeters on the paper. Now, if you add all three of them up, you should come out to exactly 105 millimeters, which is the proper back focus trained for this setup. UV IR cut filter, which is 6 millimeters thick, does not count, for it's already inside the measured adapter. Okay. And the reason you want 105 millimeters exactly measured in the in-focus point on the sensor of the ASI is that the stars that were focused on the center of the camera sensor are round in focus, would be round in focus on the edge of the sensor also. If it's not 105 millimeters, the stars on the edges of your shots taken by the camera will appear trailing or blurry. And I'm just giving you a definition of back focus. The results in millimeters will vary depending on the camera you use, so consult a dealer or camera's manufacturer for assistance. News groups or Groups IO for your camera's manufacturer are often a good source of help. Okay, now we got our back focus. Let's do some collimation. There's 3 ways I'm going to show you how to do it. We're going to do the true sky star test for collimating your SCT outside. It's the best collimating test. Now you got to make sure your telescope has been outside for at least 45 minutes to an hour, depending on the temperature outside, and that the focal reducer is off the back of the telescope. You should have just the visual back, which is right here, goes into the back of the telescope. Goes to the back of the telescope. And the eyepiece, which is a 10 or 15 millimeter eyepiece. No diagonal. Make sure all the lenses are clean and smudge marks, fingerprints, and the lip marks of dust. Track a bright star centered in the eyepiece and defocus until you get a donut with a black hole in the middle of the donut. The donut is off center, then you'll have to collimate. And here's a picture of good collimation and bad collimation. If you see a donut with a donut hole dead center, then you know you're good collimation when you focus it both ways. You focus it one way, keep on going the same way, and focus it the other way till you get the same kind of donut, then defocus it until you see that the donut hole is still in the center of the donut. Now off collimation, I'll show you what to do next. You draw a line farthest from the donut hole and outside the circle of the donut. And when you look at the front of the NexStar 6se, you put that paper, you draw a line on a piece of paper. You draw the donut hole just as you see it in the eyepiece. Draw your line farthest from the donut hole, and then match it up by putting the paper in the back of your telescope, and then looking at the front of your telescope at the secondary, and you have 3 Phillips screws. The 3 Phillips screws, the one that lines up with the line that's facing outward on the donut hole and lines up with that Phillips screw is a screw you turn 1/20th of a turn clockwise. And you keep on doing this until you try to get the donut hole dead center. Now you can do it with your computer. And I'll show you how to do that with a laptop in just a few minutes. I hope I can get it on here without messing up. Take your eyepiece out of the visual back and put in a 225 ASI224MC camera with your camera UV cut filter, then the 0.5 just the UV cut filter in that order, all the way in the visual back only. If the 6.3x is on, take it off. You're not using a diagonal. Hook up your camera to the laptop and go to SharpCap 4.0 icon on your computer's desktop. Double click. On the top of the page, click camera, then click ZWO ASI224MC in the drop-down. On the upper right side, next to zoom, on its left, you'll hover over, excuse me, a square. You'll get a switch between different styles of rectangle overlay. Click on the single crosshairs. This would put the donut directly in the center of the crosshairs. Make the adjustments like I mentioned in the preceding slides to the camera instead of the eyepiece. And then follow the diagrams of the collimation, previous slides of the diagrams, etc. I will demonstrate this procedure when I do the artificial start. With a 6.3x reducer flattener off the back of your scope, take the 1/4 visual back and screw it in the back of the 6se. So that's what I'm going to do now. Take the 6.3 reducer on the visual back. Can you see that, everybody?
Yeah, it's just to the right side of the frame, but we can see it. That's better. Dr. Suter's book on star testing astronomical telescopes would be really, really helpful for anybody that has to collimate their telescope. And the Hubble Optics artificial star is a really good, inexpensive way of doing that, doing that.
So now we're going to attach the camera with the UV IR cut filter and the 5x reducer to the visual back. But I'm not going to include the IR cut filter. That's the camera. Okay. Set up the artificial star by the Hubble Optics with the holes in front of the artificial star the same height, about 40 feet away in front of the center of your 6SC in a level horizontal position. You can use a camera tripod with elastic band, a table with books, etc. for your artificial star. From my kitchen to the living room is about 40 feet. If you don't have this setup, you can use your basement or about 40 feet of flat surface outside, your lawn, driveway. Get out your power supply and power your telescope. The AA batteries don't last long in the 6SE. Let's turn on the artificial light and face it about 40 feet away, level with the secondary in the front of the 6SE. With the light turned on, I'm going to put in a 15 millimeter lens to get it in focus, or get it in center, have this artificial in the scope. A little patience. Okay, you see that?
Yes, we can see the marching donuts.
Okay, now, those are 40 feet away. And you notice the ones closest to the center of the X. Can you see the X?
Quite well.
The one closest to the center of the X on my computer, using my camera as a collimating tool. Whoop. If you notice, the closer I get to the center of the X, wait, hold on. A little tricky here with the panel.
Dave, what are we
Closer.
looking at? What are all the four different donuts?
Yeah, well, the one closest to the X, dead center of the crosshairs, is the one you're looking at. Now you want the brightest one. So let's bring down the
He's asking, what are those? That's your artificial star,
it's
right?
my artificial star. There's five donuts, but they're not each donut hole. Each artificial star hole is a different diameter, and
Yeah,
you can't see them.
We see 3 in the fourth dim one. But that's all right. We get the idea. You don't have to go through the whole thing.
All right, so that's exactly how I collimate with an artificial star.
Except you're using the screws in the center of the secondary mirror.
Right. Now, if the donut hole was off center, you take a piece of paper and do what my diagrams were before, and draw your line, and then pick the Phillips screw that's closest to the line that you drew on a piece of paper, and keep turning that 1/20th of a turn until you get it dead center. You don't want to turn it much more than that. Now, if you can't turn it anymore, so you don't want to remount your screw, then you loosen the other two screws just 1/20th of a turn each until you can turn that screw that you drew your line to the Phillips screw. And that would bring it in a little bit more. Now, if you do remount a screw, you can unscrew it, and you can either get Bob's knobs, which is $15 to $20, I guess, or $25 for stainless steel. And there are 3 knobs that you put on the front. You don't need a screwdriver then. Little screwdriver. Put them on the front and just turn them 1/20th of the turn as you go along. That's a lot easier. I just purchased mine. They were the wrong size. You got to purchase the 10mm type for the 6se. They have 12. They'll send you a 12mm. Purchase the 10mm type for Bob's knobs. Or you can pick up the stainless steel screws in a hardware store, usually cheaper, and pick out 1 screw at a time, and put that one in and collimate it, and or come close, and take another one out, and put them in all the way around, all 3 of them.
In other words, this is a computer application that does the same thing as a HOTEC collimating tool for an SCT.
Right.
And the larger SCTs would use an Allen screw instead of a Phillips screw. And the Bob's knobs at that side are literally round-headed thumb screws. Not wing nuts, but thumb screws. So you don't take any chance of dropping your screwdriver or Allen wrench on your corrector,
Right.
meniscus. So he's just showing you the mechanical process we have to go through for collimation on his particular scope, but the basic idea translates to any SCT.
Okay, so I think you got the idea. And if you'll follow my mouse cursor, rather, you'll go to zoom up here. You see that? And you can go over to this down arrow, and you can put this crosshair, single, whatever you want to align it up, whichever is easiest for you. You can get double crosshairs, whatever. All right, so let me get out of here. That's basically how you tune up your scope with a computer.
So, Dave, this is Bill. I'm just curious.
Go ahead, Bill.
You said there's 5 different donuts there in your artificial star, and I suppose it doesn't matter what your light source is. What are the other donuts? Are they just artifacts of the optics?
No, the other donuts are the holes are so small that you can't see the light coming out.
I think he's also asking, what do you use them for? Do you use the brightest one?
Use the brightest one. Oh yeah. Just pick a brightest one and use it. Like this one here, I'm going to use here.
And then, Dave, we have
yeah,
to ignore the rest of them?
Yeah. Doesn't matter.
Is that what you're asking,
As long
Bill?
as you're dead center with
Yeah. But I'm just trying to understand, I mean, if you have a different telescope, would you see a different configuration or the same configuration?
same configuration if your camera goes to a different telescope, because you're using Sharp Cap 4.0 8 something and icon on your computer. You can use any telescope like an SCT, a Newtonian, anything.
Right.
Refractor.
I'm just trying to understand, what I'm seeing with those fainter donuts, and are they merely optical artifacts, or is there something in there that's meaningful that I'm just not picking up yet?
The donut, the round circle on the lens of the artificial star is a perfectly round circle. Is that what you're trying to say? And when
Okay.
light comes out of it,
The other ones, get fainter, and you said there was 5, I can see 4, like John mentioned. On my
Yeah, the light, depending on the lens of the artificial star. Whoop,
Oops.
depending on the lens of the artificial star, how bright the LEDs rather, how bright the star is going to be. Now, I don't have new batteries in here. So if you had new batteries, most of them would be lit.
Okay, okay, thanks.
Oh, yeah. Any other questions before I head off? Okay.
Yeah, it looks like, sorry, it looks like the Hubble artificial star does project 5 stars in a pentagon pattern. I'm not sure why they get so progressively dimmer.
For the camera,
Oops.
here, I'll put a 15mm eyepiece where the camera went in my telescope, looking at the artificial star.
But you're using the Hubble artificial star projector, right?
Yeah, it's just a
Yeah.
small flashlight with a
Yeah,
aluminum
Yeah, but-
lens with 5 holes in it.
yeah, but it does create 5 artificial stars. And if you
Yeah.
look it up, on the web, it does project 5 stars in a pentagon pattern, and they are all 5 different brightnesses. And the fifth one pretty well fades into fades out to the point where you can barely see it.
Hey, Dave, it's Ernie. Question. I assume the reason there are 5 different brightnesses is for, perhaps a larger scope. You wouldn't necessarily want to use the brightest. Maybe the
No,
brightest would be too bright, right? Like you got
right.
a scope.
If
for
you had a
example.
17, or if you have a 15-inch scope or 17-inch scope, you want to use a darker star coming out, not a bright one that's coming out.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
It'll wash out the star.
I get it. Thanks, Ernie. That makes perfect sense now.
Okay. Now let's get out of here. We'll do that. Now, don't forget, you're turning your adjustment screws clockwise. And if you can't turn them clockwise anymore, then you unscrew the other 2 screws 1/20th of a turn counterclockwise. You can turn the screw that you're aiming at clockwise. 1/20th turn. It's very important. You want to remount it and hold the back of the telescope when you're tightening the screw with your screwdriver or with a Bob's knob. Bob's knob, it doesn't matter that much, but with a Phillips screwdriver, you might remount the screw if you don't hold the back of the telescope. And then when you push hard on the screw to tighten it. Then after centering the star in the crosshairs and defocusing it, you draw your lines on paper pointing to the Phillips head screw or one of Bob's knob screws each time until the donor hole is dead center of 1/20th of a turn increments. Then you're ready for some serious observing. And that's it. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Perhaps you found it helpful. Do you have any questions? Okay.